get to talk about everything that I normally don't get the chance to talk about in my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you guys can all find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, thank you to everyone who's tuning in, whether it be via YouTube, live stream, Facebook Live, or Twitter/Periscope. Below in the description of what we have for the show today on the rundown, there should be a link. That link is my take on why Tom Brady is the 7th best player in this upcoming Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That will be going on Sunday. It's about 4 minutes, so I definitely advise you all to check it out. Also, for the podcast I'm going to be releasing tomorrow, I'm going to have Ben Karen on, host of the Sports Father podcast, and we are going to kind of talk about just some Super Bowl matchups, maybe get into some other fun football topics as well, and of course, predict and preview the game, because this is probably going to be one of the most anticipated Super Bowls of our lifetimes, right? You have Patrick Mahomes, kind of like the new GOAT, quote unquote, versus Tom Brady, the old GOAT. So here's what we have on the list today on the rundown. So Roger Goodell obviously made some Super Bowl comments, like kind of the state of the address for the NFL. QB rumor mill, we have Deshaun Watson talk, we have Carson Wentz talk. Also Alabama, their recruiting class is one of the best recruiting classes ever. And Major League Baseball and politics. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. And let's start with Roger Goodell. So Peter King, and during Roger Goodell's like kind of state of the address message that he gave, where he had this huge press conference, I think it might have been a couple hours long, and he had everybody talk to him. There were a couple questions that were asked that we're going to dive into. So one had to do with minority candidates, NFL coaches, particularly African Americans, not being hired. There was also talk about the off season with terms of maybe it all being virtual and how they're going to work with that. And Tom Brady talk. So let's start with this. Peter King, who works for NBC, posed a really interesting question, which I thought was kind of astonishing. When the Rooney Rule was integrated in 2003, there were only 3 African-American coaches. Since 2003, it is 2021 now. My math is kind of bad, but that's like 18 years. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And we still have only 3 African-American head coaches. So where do we go from here? That was kind of Peter King's question, and Roger Goodell kind of said, it's not what they anticipated, it's not what they thought, but it's kind of what happened. They're still working on it. I think it's kind of an interesting ordeal how you kind of fix this issue in the NFL. I've stated before, I think you need to get more African Americans in the coaching pipeline, whether it be for all these Division III, Division II, even Division I programs. I was talking to one of my friends, Brett Swader, when I had him on the podcast one time, and he was talking about how he knows all these people from Georgia, and they're like seven, like a guy like Kirby Smart, he'll have like 8 to 10 grad assistants, right? These guys like Nick Saban, they'll have so many grad assistants at the Division I level, and then you go to these places like even like a John Carroll, right? That's known for kind of producing people in GM roles, head coaching positions in the NFL. You have guys that have gone through that pipeline. So I think that's the best way to fix that issue right there. In terms of going virtual, he kind of made that, he kind of made the comment that online meetings could go beyond this year. And there's value in practices, 2-a-days, training camp, mini camp, all that. But, there's COVID also. Maybe the Players Association, they're kind of, maybe they want a break. They don't want to have to come into practice like that. So I think that's also something to take an eye on. And particularly maybe that's something that's going to be looked at when the next collective bargaining agreement and CBA conversation comes up and how players deal with it. Or maybe coaches decide, hey, we're not going to have all these players coming. Maybe there only needs to be mini camp. Like, how do you do this? Maybe people don't need to come to the office all the time. I think COVID's kind of changed a lot of things. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the NFL. Also, a reporter asked a really dumb question. They asked Roger Goodell about Tom Brady and Deflategate. To me, that's just stupid. Why ask that question? But Roger Goodell made a statement. He called Tom Brady the greatest player of all time, which I think is really interesting for a commissioner who's kind of supposed to be and partisan, like kind of biased, like this figure that's supposed to kind of reside over the owners. And the fact that he says that, I kind of think that gets into Tom Brady's greatness as a whole. So let's get into this. So Deshaun Watson trade talk. There's been more reports with what's going on with Deshaun Watson. Reportedly now the Jets are not on his high-end list, which I'm happy as a Bills fan. Screw the Jets. If they don't get Deshaun Watson, that's great. If Deshaun Watson doesn't want to go to the AFC East, I am having no issues with that. But also what was mentioned, what a report said, which I thought was really interesting as I'm looking at this. So what it was said is he would rather be anywhere but Houston. There's a lot of bad teams. There's a lot of bad teams out there. When somebody says, I'd rather play anywhere besides you, that is not good for the Houston Texans. And also Chris Sim, a guy who I respect a lot. He works for NBC, son of the great Phil Simms, he made the comment that Watson, and he kind of reported that Watson could sit out the whole 2021 season. I think I broached this before on this show and on my podcast before, and a lot of people talked about this on other platforms. What is Deshaun Watson going to do? Where are we going with this when it comes to Deshaun Watson? Would Deshaun Watson actually not play the whole year? Because that takes a lot. I know he's made a lot of money. He has the endorsement deals. He's not hurting for money. But to actually willingly sit out the whole year, that's the ultimate FU. And it's going to be really interesting to see if he's really about it and if he's really willing to do it. Because not a lot of players are. A lot of people say they're going to hold out like that, but not a lot of people are really trying to hold out like that. So Carson Wentz, reportedly right now, lots of teams are looking at Carson Wentz. They're calling the Philadelphia Eagles about potentially getting a Carson Wentz. And they're not really, the Eagles, I guess, they're not kind of reciprocating it right now. They kind of want to go forward with Wentz. The plan is for him to return in 2021. I think this is wrong. I think the Eagles need a fresh start. I think Carson Wentz needs a fresh start. Carson Wentz is tremendous talent. He was drafted number 2 overall in his draft class. He's a guy that was second in the MVP voting to Tom Brady. Probably would have won it if he did not tear his ACL that year. Carson Wentz has immense talent. I think he needs to get into place with maybe different change. Sometimes in life you need change, right? And I think even for the Eagles, I just think it makes sense for both sides. And I don't think having a guy like Jalen Hurts behind him, who people kind of like, kind of nipping at his heels, I don't think that's good for him. You kind of had that situation in Nick Foles where it's like, we love you, Carson, but we don't love you like that. So I think it's just best for a fresh start for everyone. I don't think the Eagles will be the best they can be. I don't think Carson Wentz will be the best he can be if it stays the same. Like this marriage needs to break up. They need to find something new. I don't even think it's good for Jalen Hurts. I just think you need a change, and I think you kind of ran this thing out as much as you can. You got rid of Doug Peterson. You're starting to get rid of that old Eagles regime. I think Carson Wentz should be the next to go. So with Alabama, they just had one of the best recruiting classes ever, the best recruiting class ever, and by rivals recruiting rankings, the best ever. And let me just read you this class. So they had 26 people in the class, 26 people, 5 5-star recruits. That's a lot. 18 4-star recruits. That is loaded. That is talent on top of talent on top of talent. And people were comparing this and saying this is going to be better than Alabama's 2017 class. Now, I'm going to give you some names that were in Alabama's 2017 class, since people are saying this class right now is going to be better than that class. The Alabama 2017 class had Najee Harris. This guy's going to play on Sundays. Probably going to be a top 2 running back taken in the draft, in this upcoming draft, by the way. Alex Leatherwood, going to be one of the top tackles taken in this upcoming NFL draft. You have Dylan Moses, who's going to be one of the top linebackers taken in this upcoming NFL draft. You have Jerry Jeudy, right, drafted by the Broncos, first-round pick, by the way. Jedrick Willis, drafted by the Cleveland Browns, first-round pick, by the way. And Mac Jones. Mac Jones was one of the ugly ducklings, so to speak, of this draft class. And Mac Jones was a AP All-American first-teamer for the quarterback position over guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. That's just how good Mac Jones was this year. And obviously Devontae Smith too, right? Devontae Smith was in that class as well. So with all that, and if you think that class, that this class currently is going to be better than the class that I just named you with those guys like Devontae Smith, Dylan Moses, Jerry Jeudy, that just tells you something special is brewing right now. That Alabama, they're just reloading. They just keep the hamster wheel going, keep the train moving. They don't stop for anything. And this is a question now that I want people to comment on if you're listening. And I'm really interested. Is Nick Saban a better coach, like schematically, or is he a better recruiter? Because he's elite at both. He might be the greatest ever at both. But I think it's really interesting. What is he better at? Because not only is he coaching at the highest level, he is recruiting at the highest level. To get all these 5 stars, 4 stars guys, it's just super impressive. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of guys that were in this draft class have tremendous success in the NFL. It's a lot easier to coach talented people. Really, they get it the first time. You don't have to explain it too much. There's not as much as developing. It's like, okay, plug and play. So I just want to know, what do you think Nick Saban's better at? Being a recruiter or being a coach? And lastly, the MLB and Joe Biden have a little bit of disagreement. Apparently Joe Biden and his constituents, the regime, the new power that's holding the highest office in the land of the United States, they kind of want Major League Baseball to postpone their season. And I guess baseball doesn't want that to happen. I think it's kind of really interesting. People always talk about, right, politics getting into sports. And this is kind of a direct thing of kind of Joe Biden being like, we prefer if you didn't. The MLB, obviously, they kind of want to play because, right, the money, the fans, these billion-dollar industries, they're not waiting for nobody. It's like, screw COVID. Like they are trying to go. We saw the NBA put on a bubble. And the NBA lost money. Even though they didn't lose money, they evened out. They evened out just to put on the bubble. Just to put on the bubble. They lost money during the bubble. They evened out in total revenue the whole year. I mean, they evened out in total revenue the whole year, but they lost money to do the bubble. They put more money in than they actually got out by putting on that whole bubble. And you know why they did it? Because they needed the season, right? It's good for your history to have a champion. Just a lot of other stuff, the TV money, and like how the NFL, how they went all 16 games with COVID. They didn't postpone anything. College football, how the SEC kind of led the way. Listen, like these billion-dollar organizations, like they realize what it is, and you will not stop them. So I think this is going to be something really interesting to look out for with Major League Baseball. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. Like I said, click on the link below to my YouTube channel. By the way, it's Daryl Lane, and subscribe to it as well. I post clips from my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, as well as I uploaded this very show on there as well. But the clip that I post on the link below in the descriptions, it's of Deshaun, it's of Tom Brady. Tom Brady, I said Tom Brady is the 7th best player in this upcoming Super Bowl. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm crazy? I'm really interested also to hear everybody's comments on Brady. 7th best player in this Super Bowl. And you also have to see and re-listen to the podcast to see the names that I had ahead of him. And also, like I said, Ben Karen, host the Sports Battler podcast, will be coming on the show tonight. I will release that podcast on Twitter, on Facebook, tomorrow morning, so definitely be on the lookout for that. We're getting the home stretch of the NFL season, folks. Have a great day and God bless.